Howdy folks, welcome back to Boondockery. This is going to be my 2021-2022 Winter Kit After Actions Report. In the autumn of 2021, I decided that there were a few pieces of kit that I owned that I was going to use exclusively throughout an entire winter camping season. Those categories were my sleep system, my shelter, my pack system, and also my cook system. Those pieces of kit that I chose to use, I did use 100% completely, exclusively from November to March. Now to start with, I had to think about the pack system that I was going to use. I have several pack systems that I would consider to be perfect for winter camping because they are a large capacity, and for the most part, items that you take winter camping are large and bulky. Sometimes not exactly heavyweight, but they still take up a lot of space. So, and looking at my packs that I had, and also because I have a very special place in my heart for one in particular, I decided to go with the ILBE pack system. And that included the use of the assault pack. I also added, in addition to what comes standard with it, the two pieces, well actually three if you count the lid as being a separate one, I also added two Camelback Nalgene bottle pouches for extra hydration. For my sleep system, I decided, since I had bought it and I really hadn't had a chance to really use it, I decided to go with my Snugpak Special Forces sleep system. For my shelter, I decided to go with my DD 4x4 Multicam Tarp. And for my cook system, I decided that I was going to go exclusively to my Firebox Stove. In addition to using my Firebox Stove, because I have a lot of different possible ways in which I can utilize this stove system, I also, from time to time, would take a Trangia alcohol burner and also a Trangia gas stove. Now, when I made the decision that I was going to be utilizing my Snugpak Special Forces sleep system, that was a very, very difficult decision for me because I absolutely love hammock camping in the winter. I mean, it's the most comfortable all the way around, and I'm very used to it. I've done it for years, and it was difficult because I'm not a huge fan of ground camping. Now, one nice thing about it is seeing that my semi-permanent camp isn't too far away from my vehicle. Not only was I ground camping, but on occasion I was also able to do a little cot camping, which was a lot more comfortable than a ground camping. Now, as far as a review factor goes for this video, I have already done very thorough reviews on the DD 4x4 Multicam Tarp, the Firebox Stove, and my ILBE. I'll be posting links to all three of those videos so you can check those out and actually really get a good thorough review of those items. Now, my Special Forces sleep system, I will be doing a formal review for it very, very shortly. Look for it very soon. Now, for those of you that don't like my long videos, that's okay. I'll go ahead and put the timestamp on there where you can go ahead and fast forward so you can see my final thoughts on these four items as standalone kit items for winter camping. Now, if by any chance you happen to have seen my review on the DD 4x4 Multicam Tarp, that was about as thorough as I could get with my experience with the tarp, and I've owned this for many, many years. As far as my winter camping exclusive use of this tarp, I didn't use just one tarp. I used two tarps. They were identical, both 4x4 Multicam tarps. I set one up as a lean-to for basically sitting in a foul weather place to stack firewood, keep it dry, and generally just hang out during the day when it's just chilling out, doing a few camp chores and things like that. The other tarp I set up in a modified A-frame configuration, which I've used for years, and it's absolutely a fantastic system. And again, if you want to see any of that, check out my DD 4x4 Multicam Tarp review, and you can get to see that configuration. Now, this tarp is an absolutely fantastic tarp, and my choice for using this exclusively in the winter was more of a decision just to more or less give it a torture test. And they were set up in a stagnant position for 5 months and exposed to the elements the entire time. And whenever I camped at my semi-permanent camp, which is here, they were already set up. I came out once a week and retightened all the guy lines, the ridge line. If the wind had blown them free, I restaked them. And just basically either on a weekly basis I came out to check on them, or I actually camped in them. And these have definitely proven their worth. Now, when I did not use these is when I camped at my secret fun spot. And then I camped in rock shelters, and there were a couple times that I went ahead and took my Light Fighter 1. And I've done a couple review videos on that as well. But that unfortunately was few and far between. I camp most of the time here. Now, the biggest thing that I noticed with the exposure to the elements for the months that I exposed them there was the fact that they did fade. And it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. As far as the fabric goes, as far as the waterproofing goes, it did not affect it one iota. The fabric was not harmed at all by the UV. It's just the color on it made it a little more conducive to fall winter camping. All of the dark browns lightened, the greens lightened, and as you can see, there is a big difference between the faded tarp and the unfaded bag, and they simply worked absolutely fantastic. If I were to have chosen to make this a mobile camp and use this exclusively throughout the winter, I wouldn't have felt any differently about it. I would have thought that, yeah, this is my winter camp system, because in the modified A-frame, it is absolutely fantastic. It's essentially a tent, but it can be whatever I want it to be, depending on how I choose to configure it. It's just that I know that the modified A-frame works absolutely marvelously and suits every need that I've ever had while using it to camp with. So the two Multicam 4x4 tarps were absolutely fantastic. And as far as winter camping goes, this is one tarp that I think is absolutely invaluable. Now, if you happen to have seen my ILBE pack review, you know how I feel about this pack. It's absolutely a phenomenal pack. In my humble opinion, it's the best pack system that's ever been mass issued by the United States military ever. And you know, that's quite a statement, but I stand by that. Now, as far as a winter camping pack, this is absolutely ideal. The size of the capacity and the design of the internal frame, the straps, the waist belt, all of those things combined make it incredibly suitable for carrying heavier loads and bulkier loads, all of which are what you see when you go winter camping. You take extra stuff with you. You do not take with you during the warmer months. The extra capacity you have with the lid, in addition to the extra capacity that you have with the assault pack, really lends a lot of versatility on the type of kit that you take with you. For the kit that I took, everything fit absolutely perfect. I primarily used my assault pack as my food, cook system, and my must-have items, the things that I take with me all the time. The main pack carried all of the other things that I normally take with me when I go camping, but all those things were modified and made much larger because they were winter. I actually have a video that I go through the entire contents of my backpack for winter camping, and I'll post that link in the comments below so you can see what all I get in this pack for winter camping. Now, as far as the dimensions go, I have a lot. Yeah, I know this comes as a big surprise to some of you, but I have a lot of backpacks, and I have several that are particularly large and are fantastic winter packs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the dimensions of those, and just as a comparison to the dimensions and the volume capacity of the ILBE. Now, I have a Tactical Tailor Rhino, and the main pack is 3,400 cubic inches. The pockets that are on there add up to 1,650 cubic inches, which is a total, volume space within that one pack of 5,050 cubic inches, which is 82 liters. I also have a Mystery Ranch Mountain Ruck. I have used that in the past for my winter camping, and it is 4,800 cubic inches or 78 liters. Now, as you can see, that's substantially less space than the Rhino. My first major purchase when I first got into this modern wild camping thing was a Mystery Ranch Wolf Pack, and I will do a review on that, even though it hasn't been in production for 8 to 10 years. But the main pack is 4,200 cubic inches. The Wolf Pup, which is the sleeping system carrier that goes underneath the main pack, is 1,900 cubic inches, and the lid has an additional 900 cubic inches, which is its total of 7,000 cubic inches. And so that's a total of 114 liters. So that is definitely one of my largest packs. Now, the ILBE is, the main pack is 4,516 cubic inches. The assault pack is 1,647 cubic inches, or main pack 75 liters, assault pack 27 liters, which winds up being a max capacity of 6,223 cubic inches. So you have a substantial amount of space there. As far as the liters go, it's 102 liters. So it's not my largest pack, but most definitely was large enough to accommodate all of my winter camping needs. One more addition to this is the way that this pack is designed. Even when you have a full assault pack attached to the exterior of the main pack, the way the strap system and suspension system is designed on this, it's incredibly easy to use in winter terrain. When you have mud, you have ice, you have snow, in addition to all of the other obstacles that I encounter when I go camping, because I don't use trails. That suspension system made it incredibly comfortable, and it held to my body like it was part of my body. There was only 2 times that I had any issue. And one of which is when I was standing on a absolute sheet of ice. And I was standing there. I walked across it no problem whatsoever, and I was standing there, and all of a sudden, boom, I went down. And there was another time, the same outing, I did slip and fall on another sheet of ice. And but that was the only time throughout those 5 months of winter camping that I had any issue with losing my traction or losing my balance and falling. It had nothing to do with the pack. I honestly believe that in both those situations, had I been standing there with no pack on whatsoever, the exact same thing would have happened. As far as my cook system goes, I decided to go with my Firebox Stove. Now, the Firebox Stove is incredibly versatile. And even though I have like the complete kit, all the possible accessories that you can possibly get for this stove system, as far as the stove itself goes, I never took all of it with me. Depending on what I was cooking and how I was intending on cooking, determined what I brought with me. So I never took the entire system. The biggest complaint that I've heard that I think is substantiated with this stove system is the weight. It is heavy. However, when you're very selective as far as the accessories that you take with you, that cuts down the weight, quite a bit, because everything is stainless steel. So if you're only taking your stove and whatever other accessories you want to choose to take, that mitigates a lot of that weight issue. This wasn't just my stove, it was also, from time to time, a portable fire pit. Part of that versatility is all the different cooking methods that you have available to you, of which I used all of during my winter camping. I utilized charcoal, I utilized wood pellets, I utilized wood that I found on the forest floor, I utilized alcohol, and I utilized a gas stove which could use isobutane or butane from a butane bottle. Whenever I used the alcohol or the isobutane butane stove, I could actually use this inside my modified A-frame DD 4x4 shelter. And not only do you have the joy of being able to cook when you're not being peppered down with wet snow, but it also actually provided a small amount of heat inside the shelter. Depending on what I was going to be cooking when I went out, that would make the determination as to which one of these accessories that I would take with me. A little bit of planning and a lot of decision making, but once you have made your mind up what you're going to take, you only took those items, so you never had these extra things that you had to worry about with as far as bulk or the weight. Due to the nature of the design of this stove, I can clear out an area of snow and set this down on the ground without any fear of any of the moisture from the melting snow affecting the quality of the fire. Because of the nature of the design of this stove system, it is incredibly easy to deploy when you're wearing heavy winter gloves and mittens. That really adds a lot to its appeal as far as winter camping goes, because you don't want to be handling stainless steel in temperatures that are going to dip below zero. Once again, referring to the design, which is absolutely brilliant, this stove is incredibly compact and takes up very little space in your pack. The final item I decided to use exclusively throughout those winter camping months was the Snugpak Special Forces sleep system. The system comprises of a smaller, lighter weight, summer weight bag, an intermediate bag, and a attachment system which is also capable of acting as a baffle to prevent any type of drafts coming in through the zipper. Now, I tried to assemble this system and pack it in the larger compression bag which comes with the system, and unfortunately with the pack that I was deciding to take, the ILBE, It was difficult to pack. It really took up a lot of space as far as a bulk space in the pack. When I broke the components down into their smaller subsets, I had a lot more versatility as far as how I could pack that in my pack, and to adjust that to where, even though technically it was taking up the same amount of space, by packing them in their own individual compression bags, I could compress them individually to where they actually took up less space than when I tried to compress them all together. And it allowed me to adjust them to pack the other items around them in my pack, and it just made it a whole lot easier for transportation. However, because of that, you have to assemble the system every single time that you're setting up camp. Seeing that you have to assemble these components when you're setting up camp, if you choose to transport them in the manner in which I did, it winds up being a little bit tedious in winter conditions. Being able to manipulate all the zippers of assembling the components, it takes a few minutes when you don't have to contend with the temperatures, and you can do it with bare hands without the wind and the low temperatures affecting your dexterity. It goes together pretty quick. And another thing, this system, the individual component sleeping bags, I feel are just a bit snug. And I know that they're called Snugpak, but I don't believe that their mission statement includes that their products be something that is going to refer back to part of their company name. I'm not a particularly large fellow, and when I get inside this, there's enough room for me. And I am actually used to having a little more space inside the bag. Individually, when you are using these, it doesn't feel as though that snugness is quite as snug, but when they're assembled, it definitely has a tendency to pull those components in to where it even feels more snug around your body than they do in their individual components. Didn't particularly care for that. I like to be able to, especially when I'm ground camping, I like to be able to have the ability to be able to roll on my shoulder or my side and adjust myself. But when the entire sleep system is sort of constricting around your body, that makes that a little bit more of a challenge and a little less comfortable. Now, both bags have a very well designed baffle system. So in extreme cold, you have the ability to adjust the neck baffles and also to adjust the hood to where it comes in pretty quick. It is a fairly complicated system, and when you're cold and you're in your sleeping bag and you're trying to get those things adjusted for the first time, it's a little bit of a challenge. It's not easy. But once you have played with it a little bit, you get it figured out, you know, it was much easier. Eventually what I decided to do is I would go ahead, and once I had them all adjusted the night before and they were in place, I left them alone. I didn't bother to uncinch the cords, and so they stayed in place, which for the most part worked out fine. If by any chance I would have experienced much warmer temperatures by the time I stopped using this as a winter camp system, I really would have had to undo that to allow some of that heat out. But the baffle system worked very well for extreme cold temperatures. As far as the warmth factor goes for this system, I always, when it's pretty cool to cold, I always use what I call my sleep kit, and that's a complete base layer, top, bottom. I have fresh, dry, thick wool socks. I have glove liners. I pack a balaclava and a sleep cap, And so if it's not particularly cold, I just use my sleep cap, and that provides just enough insulation to where my head can be out of there. And so I always sleep with a base layer, which Snugpak recommends that you do. Now, even with that base layer sleep kit that I have, the accuracy for the temperature ratings of these bags individually or as a set is inaccurate. If the comfort rating, let's say for one, just happens to be 40 degrees, I'd increase that up to 50 because every single time I use this, I checked out the temperature for the forecast for the day overnight, and that's what I based whether or not I used one or the other or the combination. And almost every single time that I went out and I was close to the temperature rating of the bag and the overnight low, I always had to use my Swagman roll as an insulation multiplier to sleep comfortably. That's including my sleep kit base layer. So if you wind up purchasing this system or the individual components, keep that in mind, that whatever the temperature rating is for low, you increase that number by at least 10 degrees Fahrenheit, at least. And you will probably be more comfortable than if you trust the rating that's actually on the website. Now, as far as the complete sleep system goes, when it's completely assembled, with my Swagman roll, I was able to sleep comfortably at 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you don't have your insulation multiplier, I would say the comfortable sleeping rating for this system with your complete base layer and wool socks should be right around 32 degrees. That being said, my winters here in southeastern Ohio get far colder than that. And so this is not something that would probably be ideal for winter camping, unless your winter camping is a little bit on the warmer side, hovering right around the freezing range, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius. And you need to keep that in mind for winter camping if you're considering this. Now, whenever you're ground camping, you have to think about protecting yourself from the ground temperatures, because when you're laying on the ground in your sleep system, whatever that system may be, you're going to compress that insulation and you are going to be cold from the ground. I utilized a self-inflating air mattress or an inflatable air mattress or a isomat, and there were a couple times to where I combined those two. If you're in a good position, like if you're in a bivvy, you're in a bivvy bag, you're in a bivvy shelter, you can just lay those out on the ground and lay on those, as long as the confinement of that bivvy is conducive to hold them in place to where you're not accidentally rolling off of them and getting those cold spots from your sleeping bag and your body touching the ground beside the sleep pads and sleep mats. I did several occasions put the sleep pads between the outer layer, which is the sleep system 1, and the inner layer, which is a sleep system 2. And that worked absolutely fantastic. However, it does add just a little teeny tiny bit to that snugness factor. It makes it just a little more snug, but definitely not enough to not do it. And that worked out really, really well, especially when I camped in a couple of the rock shelters. Folks, I really enjoyed this little challenge, this little experiment of having a few dedicated exclusive use pieces of kit. It allowed me to get extremely familiar with the use of the items and also with perfecting the loadout of these particular items. Now, in the past, I thoroughly enjoyed taking out different pieces of kit, using different pieces of kit, but it was always a challenge as far as determining your loadout depending on the size and shape of the items you're taking with you. And to be able to just go out, grab a few items that you know you're going to be using, know exactly where they're going to go, having dedicated items for a particular season really works well. It definitely sped up my packing and preparation for any of my camping trips, and I didn't have to think about it. I just grabbed it, put it in a pack where I know it goes, and off I went. So that was one very positive of this particular experiment. Now the big question is, would I use any of these pieces of kit again for the winter? Or better yet, let's just say that I had to bug out and I had to grab a few quick items and take off in the middle of winter and rely on those items to get me through a good period of time in the winter. Would I use any of these? With one exception, absolutely. And that one exception would be the Snugpak sleep system. Because where I live, winters can easily dip well below zero actual temperature, not even thinking about wind chill. And this Snugpak Special Forces sleep system, even with a Swagman roll insulation multiplier, cannot do it. It absolutely cannot do it. So this would not go. This will definitely be something I'm going to be using in the warmer months. Basically, if I am out summer camping, I'd use the Special Forces 1. If it's anywhere between 40 degrees and 60 degrees, maybe as low as 35. If I had my Swagman roll with me, I'd use the Special Forces 2. Thinking about it now, if you're going to be looking at your overnight lows before you go out, always put in that question mark. Always plan for 10 to 20 degrees colder than what it's actually going to be. I think in the long run it would just be easier to grab a sleeping bag that you already have, that you've already tested, that you know is functional in a particular temperature range, and grab that and go. But like I said, this was a system I've never really used that much, and I wanted to put it through its paces. So now I know that for at least 35 to 40 degrees on up, this will be perfectly fine for me to use either individually or as a system throughout the rest of the year. Probably just not a winter one. Well folks, there you have it. My after actions report of the items I chose to use exclusively through the 2021-2022 winter camping season. As always folks, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.